Hello everyone and welcome to our presentation, The Consultant as an Inclusion Agent, an approach from the perspective of singularity. Nietzsche once said, become who you are, do what only you can do, be the master and the sculptor of yourself. Nietzsche's notion of becoming who you are is a criticism of a lack of consciousness as well as our general inability to reflect on our life as a whole. In times of uncertainty, with the increasing globalization and the present COVID-19 crisis that further highlights the phenomenon of social distancing, it is common to wonder about the preservation of personal identities in the mold of uniformity and standardization of norms and practices, particularly within organizations. Employees are more attentive and more sensitive to the identity of the company they work for. There is an urgent need to create more inclusive workplaces. Yet, there has been very little research about how consultants can enhance workplace inclusion. Previous research on inclusion has largely been conducted in the context of treating the inherent problems of diversity, such as discrimination, bias, and tokenism. In doing so, is the difference between individuals in terms of origins, genders, age, disabilities, etc., which have been highlighted, rather than the tremendous potential of integration. Therefore, today, scholars offer a more systemic approach and increasingly focus on ways to integrate diverse individuals in organizations. Starting from there, our research offers to go beyond the ideological stage of inclusion to get closer to its operational level. This is made possible through a revelation of singularity of the organization as the backbone of inclusion with the help of the consultant. Hence, our research question is, what are the consultant's roles and methods as an inclusion agent? Becoming who we are implies a notion of relationship. Every time we interpret something, we engage in a relationship because the very act of attempting to understand and categorize things implies a dialogue with ourselves and others, a self-conscious examination and a critical engagement in collective setting. An in situ, immersive, user-centered or ethnographic methodology is thus necessary. With the help of one observing participating researcher, the consultant, and two observing researchers to eliminate interpretation bias, we collected data from 4 collective intelligence workforce in 4 client companies, employing 190 to 12,000 people, generating sales of between 16 million and 4 billion euros, and operating in different business sectors, banks, insurance, logistics, mobile phone networks. Prior work of the consultant for the workshop, there was phase 1, prototyping. The founder's vocabulary and institutional communication were analyzed to determine the singularity profile of the organization. Phase 2, collective intelligence. A collective workshop was then organized, the management team to interact the commonly shared principles that constitute the singularity of the organization. A stabilized version was then produced and communicating for use. At this stage, we noticed 3 observable effects. Psychological functional ownership of the tool. In psychology, ownership is the feeling that something is yours, a possession that helps people to establish their self-identity, both to themselves and to others. As a consequence, the second observable effect was the setting in motion of the team. The previous sense of ownership is not challenged by a higher authority, for example, but shared by all members. As a consequence, the third observable effect was the better functioning of the team as a whole. As you can see from this graph, our approach complements and clarifies Chalmers' Theory U. Theory U is a method of conducting collective intelligence. It is oriented towards the discovery and implementation of innovative solutions. It is about seeking to develop and implement breakthrough innovations in line with the need for a future radically different from the past, on the basis of work integrating individual and collective introspection. The consultant, as an expert, compares the elements of the discourse with his categorical analysis grid and identifies the elements which form a broad consensus. communication of the prototype by the consultant leads the client to access different representations of the organizational identity. When participants identify the singularity of the organization as a prototype, they do not access the full expression of their personal identity or organizational identity. This is just the beginning, the first step of the intervention. The workshop is organized with the management team members. Each is asked to discuss the purpose of the organization, why do we exist, the business of the organization, how do we do things, and the principles of the organizations, what are our values. Everyone's self-perception is valued. This is self-inclusion. From there, the consultant as a facilitator brings the different members of the group to share the conclusions. It leads to an enriched version of the initial self-observation. The result is a shared singularity of the organization or group inclusion. The common version of the text will constitute the mission statement of the organization. It means to reduce the gap between the strategic, why, tactical, how, and operational, what, levels, in order to create meaning. The final text will serve a common direction and perspective or inclusion of sense. We observe three patterns of inclusion. Self-inclusion, with employees and managers better identify and describe who they are. I understood that I was in my place where I am. Confirmation of an alignment between my inner personality and my work, which, in a way, allowed me to secure my position and the role I had to play. It reassured me. Self-inclusion also plays a role in reflexive capacity. Indeed, the process allows to reflect on what was done before, using a new analytical grid to take an enriched look at the world and to act in full awareness according to a more rational dynamic. Self-inclusion allows to have more realistic vision and therefore to project without having to compromise with or deny one's principles and values. Group inclusion. It manifests itself through benevolence and the desire to better understand others in order to manage conflicts, be less judgmental, improve relationships, listen more, speak less, and avoid domination. I was very impressed by the word exercise. The vocabulary produced fiction. I touched my finger at how much this had created the dynamic in the group in which I participated. It increases the level of trust in the team, and team functioning will then improve. Group inclusion also generates energy and strength. Collective intelligence action increases the level of performance and triggers development. It leads to an awareness of the sustainability of the organization and the need to overhaul a strategy that is in line with the singularity of the company. Inclusion of sense. Sense is revealed when employees find meaning in their action and when managers who are going through a period of doubt and uncertainty find new impetus. Conflicting asperities can be removed and people can agree on a point of equilibrium from which it is possible to build again. We all fell aligned and homogeneous as to the best way to deal with the subject because they are the elements that reveal our singularity. At the organizational level, there is a more entrenched refocusing strategies that make it possible to envisage long-term transformation projects. Our research question was, what are the consultant's roles and methods and as inclusion agent? Our ethnographic approach has contributed to better understand the role of consultant as an inclusion agent. We distinguish between purpose and process. In terms of purpose, intervention on organizational identity increases self-inclusion, group inclusion, and inclusion of sense. In terms of process, the inclusion of members is in the expression of their singularity and their preparation for action. Starting from there, our research offers to go beyond the ideological stage of inclusion to get closer to its operational level. Thank you for your attention.